I think it depends on the context of what you're trying to achieve as to what makes a group work really well. But I think at its basis, it's a group that's empowered. It's not just one person sitting in a room telling everyone what to do. It's you know, a group of people working together collectively. Everyone's bringing their unique skills to the movement, and those skills are all valued and you know, being utilised to their full effect to make a difference.
I think what makes an environmental group or network work really well is having people in there that are passionate about whatever the issue is that the group is focused on, and that they're actually giving time and their skills and abilities to actually make things happen on the ground. The other key thing I think is really important is understanding everyone's skill sets and passions, and so you're making sure that you're aligning what the group's doing with what people actually care about. I think the third thing is getting results, those visible results early on within the group, whatever it might be, so that people get excited and have momentum. Because if you have this big lofty goal that's way down in the future and people can't see any way of getting there, then they're not going to stay engaged with the group either. So you need that momentum. So easy wins early on.
I think a group works really well, and I know the groups that I work with that work really well are the ones that have really good mateship, and they have a really good social element to what they're doing, and they know their skills and their capacity, and they work together really well as a team.
In working out what the right model for our group is and whether it's working or not, when I came into the group, and I think most of the people that are currently in the group, we had an existing model. So we had the group set up, and you come into a group and you don't really know what's going on. You gradually learn it, and you learn what the group does, and to some extent why it's doing it and what the overall picture is. So we come into it like that, and you can easily then just drift along like that without really having a thought out idea of what you're doing as time goes by and as members change. And fairly soon after I joined the group, we decided to have a planning day to revisit what we were doing and why we were doing it. It was a time of change. Our long-term president had just left. He'd been there for close to 20 years. So that planning day, we structured that fairly well and sought ideas from people beforehand over a period of time. So we came armed with ideas from our community of interest and people in the group about what they thought was important for the group to be doing. We then looked at that and discussed that and put weightings against different things until we came up with a fairly good idea of what we were about. We also talked about what the larger overall aim for the group was, and that was really valuable. I think probably in the time I've been involved, that's the single most important thing in making the group coherent and on the same track and energised and feeling like we really got a purpose.
As a small community group or a large community group, you can exist in different ways from a legal basis as a legal entity. One way is to be incorporated and exist as an incorporated body, and the other way is to just be a community group. Understand that if you aren't incorporated as a body, if you are seeking any type of funding, quite often you will need to have an auspicing role set up. So another organisational body who is incorporated will need to act as your guarantor when it comes to receiving any funds, and normally that's as simple as making that organisation aware of the project or program that you're running, and if it aligns with their values and behaviours, they may be happy to take the auspicing role legally on paper. In a practical sense, it means if you are successful in winning the funds, that money will be transferred into the accounts of the auspicing body, and then they will then facilitate passing that money on to you financially on a separate basis. It does provide you with some security too. You may have an auspicing third-party body who has a large amount of insurance because they are an incorporated body, and when it means engaging with volunteers or participating in field-based activities, if you as a small community group don't have insurances, it's critical that you do reach out and have an auspicing body that can have you covered from an insurance perspective for your volunteers and the people that you're working with.
When you're working in your group, having a plan always helps. I think one of the key things about strategic planning is actually figuring out what your group can do, what the strengths are, and also what your weaknesses are, so that you can make a realistic plan. Obviously we all want to save the world, but we do need to break it down to something that, all right, what's something we can achieve in the next 1 year, what's something we can achieve in the next 3 years, and then we can make the steps along the way to do that. And I think that's why sometimes people get disempowered is because they're not sure how they can make a difference. And by breaking down these really big issues, which is hard, that's how we can make really clear pathways to take action.
As a group, I guess we had some of our early sessions when we were first getting together really were just about getting to know each other a little bit better, understanding what environmental issues we were most passionate about. And as a group, it seemed like the common thread was around waste, rubbish, reducing, recycling. And so we decided that was a good area to focus in on. We also then spent a fair bit of time just brainstorming, well, what could we do? And coming up with lots of different ideas. And then it was a matter of sitting down and thinking, what should we pick to start with? And it's worked out that the things we've picked have been chosen because they were slightly time critical. So our example of Plastic Free July, that we're in the lead up to July, so we're like, well, that's a perfect example to jump onto something that's really relevant. And then the next big thing we've been working on is the lead up to the local government election. So again, that was a time critical thing. So we decided, well, that's the perfect thing to focus on next.
How we plan and prioritise things is sometimes driven from within the group, and sometimes it's a response to opportunities that come our way. And that might be there's a grant available to do certain things, and we think, hey, we can do that if we get this grant, and that'll fit really well with what our aims are in this particular area.
For example, I'm working on a campaign against a radioactive waste dump, and some people in the community are going, let's blockade. There is no site yet. It's not the time to do a blockade because there's nowhere to go at this point. If they picked a site, it might come to that. So you've got to think about what are the right tools for this time. And so thinking about what do we want to achieve, how are we going to get there, who are the stakeholders, what are the soft targets, what are the harder targets, and what priority we want to put there. And having that outline to start with is a good way for you to be able to stay the course in your campaign, because a lot of the time something will come out of government or industry or whatever that can completely change the direction of what you're doing. So it's good to be able to stick to your plan, not completely rigidly, because you do have to react to the government or industry, but have that and go, okay, we'll deal with that, but we're still going in this direction, we're still going to win this fight.
In the environment movement, there's lots of different types of decision making. There's things like modified consensus and consensus decision making, where you really get everyone in the room basically to agree. There's more traditional forms of decision making around majority vote. There's effectively the method of the person who's doing all the work makes the decisions, and it really depends on what's going to work for your group and I think the experience of your group as well. So consensus can be really effective, but if it's outside the experience of your group completely and people don't like maybe saying when they disagree, you could end up with just a situation where one or two people are running the show anyway and running this sort of fake process. So yeah, I think you want to do your best to have really good processes in place. You want to have facilitators who aren't necessarily the ones making all the decisions or putting everything forward.
Depending on your model again, some decision-making processes have to be quite formalised because you have to vote and you have to record minutes about it. But I mean, I think at the basic level is making sure that everyone knows that there's a decision ahead, and talking to people, asking them their perspectives, what they think about it. And if there is conflict, then I think that sometimes that's when you need to go through a more democratic process.
We have a collective decision-making model. It's actually written into our constitution that we don't need to pass motions, that we agree things at meetings. We still do pass motions when we feel it's important. And that's a really good model, but it's also a bit dependent on people actually agreeing, and if you get some strong disagreement, that can be a bit difficult, but it just means that you need to work through things and either come to compromises or find ways that people can agree about something.
In a group where there's conflict, and every group will be different and all the conflict is for different reasons, and I find usually if there is any sort of a disagreement within the group, it's just based around passion for what people are doing. So they've got a really strong drive for something they want to achieve, and that might just be a bit different to somebody else in the group. And I think again, that's just a matter of sitting down and having a chat about, you know, what are we trying to achieve as a group, or what are we trying to achieve on an individual level. So for some people, particular weeds are their focus. That's what they really want to get rid of, and they think that's the most important thing. And you might have another person in the group who thinks a different weed is the most important thing. And I think just recognising that people have their different passions for what they want to achieve is really important, and then just discussing how they can work together.
And also to be aware that often we make decisions and they can be completely wrong, and not to take any sense of shame or guilt if you make a wrong decision. What you want to do is recognise that's a feedback loop, and that you can go back and go, oh, that didn't work. What do we need to do to correct it? So that there's no sense of blame or you've messed up, you've made a big mistake. If you can let go of your ego and just look at what have you learnt from that experience, and how can you improve it and correct it.
To attract new volunteers, groups probably need to get their name out there a little bit more about their group, and whether that's using social media platforms or getting out into the media with some stories and networking. I think attending different events and getting to know other volunteers and other people and community groups in their area is really key as well. Working collaboratively with lots of different people tends to sort of spread the word about your group and what you're doing, and that tends to help perhaps recruit some new people into the group.
Attracting good volunteers can be really tough, and what I have found is that sometimes you'll be screaming out for help and volunteers and stuff, and you just seem a little bit desperate. No one wants to jump on board. But if you're out there with a group doing something creative or inspirational or productive or just shiny, anything productive, making a good noise, doing it with integrity and strength, people kind of become attracted to that and join the group. So I've found when people go out recruiting and trying to get people, like, you kind of lose people a lot faster than if people come to the group because they're attracted to what you do. So if you build a good reputation with, could be 2 or 3 people, could be one person even really, and then more people will come. You go, we're doing this, if you'd like to join us at our next organised meeting, feel free. People like what you've done, they'll turn up, they'll step up and they'll contribute.
Yes, with our group, we're fairly oriented in 2 ways, making on-ground change, but also in engaging and empowering the local community. So we have a fairly strong emphasis on publicising what we do and getting the word out about what we're doing. Sometimes it makes people think that we're bigger and more active than we are, but it's really good for getting people engaged with the environment, knowing what's going on, perhaps getting a bit more interested, perhaps wanting to get involved.
I think it's important to make people feel safe, make people feel welcome and make them feel valued, and make sure that they know that they're not pressured or expected to do anything that they're not comfortable with or feel like they're capable of. It's in all the meetings I attend, you do introductions, you give a little bit of a background of what's going on for the new people. People that have been there a lot longer always deal with that, because people do need to be on the same page, and sometimes it takes a few meetings for a new person to feel like they have a voice, but they're always given that opportunity.
When we get new people involved with the group, I certainly make an effort to spend some time with them and talk about not only about what our group does and what's good about it and what things they might be interested in, but also about them, what they're interested in, what skills they've got, what things they might like to do with the group. Are they interested in just sitting around for a while and finding out what happens? Are they interested in planting plants and that's all they really want to do, for example? Are they interested in helping with publicity for events? But having chats about those sorts of things and getting to know the person a bit really pays some dividends, and of course also helps the bonds within the group as you get to know people better.
People participating once isn't a conversion to them making a personal commitment to something, and you need, if you engage an audience, you need to engage them more than once to get some level of buy-in. And for every Every time you run a workshop or an activity, for every 10 people you have in the room, there'll be 1 or 2 who are wholly committed and emotionally engaged in the experience, and you know that you've captured their attention and they'd be prepared to volunteer or give more time to the cause. But for the rest of the percentage of the room, they may have enjoyed the experience, but there may be no further take-homes that they have from it. And they're the people that you, if you are interested in their skill set or them volunteering more, that you do need to find another opportunity to engage them again. And the more diverse a group can be, I must stress, is the better. You want young and old and middle-aged. You want people from all diverse backgrounds participating, because that creates an energy and a movement in a room, and new types of relationships can be forged, and quite often a lot of nimble, innovative activities and problem solving happens when you get a diverse audience. So never underestimate the power of increasing your community group's reach and inviting new or different people in to help you problem solve.